Hey friends, I've got the top of the hour. So I'm Jeremy Watson. I'm product manager here on the Manage team. Excited to have a group conversation here about Manage, what we're working on now and where we're going in the future. So before we dig into any discussion and questions, I'll throw it over to Liam and Dennis, the engineering managers also at Manage, to introduce themselves. Dennis, over to you.
Cool, thanks, Jeremy. I'm Dennis, front-end engineering manager for Manage. Next week's my 1 year, so that's cool. Other than that, yeah, just happy to answer any questions about the front-end side of things for Manage. But if not, I'll just hand it over to Liam for his introduction.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm Liam. I'm the back-end engineering manager for the Manage team. To follow on from Dennis's theme there, in 2 days it'll be my 6 months. I'm not quite as experienced, but I'm catching you up, Dennis. And likewise on the questions. Apologies, we tried to we've only just updated the slides on the event a few short minutes ago, so apologies if not everyone had as much time to look at those as they would like. But yeah, I mean we're happy to take any questions or comments that there may be.
So one interesting thing that I've been noticing related to Manage items is I've been working on a couple of different templates and also asking about templates for many people.
I'm a bit confused. Where's the presentation? I don't see it on the calendar.
If you refresh your calendar page.
I got it in there a few minutes ago. I also have linked it in the chat. Here.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, I think you started to say something about project templates.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've noticed that there's interest both in making them, and maybe I'll just advertise again the same thing I did on the company call, that if anybody knows how to make a project that demos some technology stack or language or whatever, I can pretty easily now convert those into project templates. But the other thing that came up that was really interesting is the idea that companies may be interested in, so for Dell, for example, or some other company, you could have like the Dell template for development in this department, and they could create those themselves and then publish them out to their own engineering organizations. It's a interesting idea, and it could help ensure that teams at companies like that, large enterprises, are doing more consistent development. So I just wanted to pass that on. I know you guys are already aware.
Thanks for raising that, Jason. It's actually on my to-do list to reach out to you directly. I've been spending a bit of time over the last few days looking at the implementation of project templates, and I saw your merge request, and you seem to have a good idea of kind of how they work. One of the questions I was going to ask you directly was, I don't know if it's fair to say they've had a bit of a revival recently in terms of I've seen them mentioned a lot more. It's functionality that's been there for a while. What's caused that? Is it, I think one of the changes it underwent was for auto DevOps to make everything compatible on that side. Has that been part of it, or is there another reason this has sort of become more?
No, I think that the reason, honestly, is that nobody had worked on it for a while. I don't know why that's the case, but I had an issue where we wanted to add some Pages templates because we wanted to make Pages easier to use. So I went in and added a few Pages templates, and then I was like, wow, we can do a ton with this feature. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to make an iOS and an Android one, and then okay, I'm going to make a ones for Netlify, which are now working, and just they're easy to make once you start going, and they're valuable. So I think that that's kind of just what triggered that.
Awesome, that sounds good. Yeah, as I said, it's something that is on my to-do list at the moment. I'm hoping in this milestone we can make good progress. Jeremy's spent a bit of time updating the contribution guidelines, and obviously we want to make a few improvements there. And we're going to have a dedicated maintainer in the team as well to make any additions and changes easier.
Have we found someone for the .NET template?
Is that, have we found someone to contribute a .NET template?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know, Jason or others, whether you have any more info on that.
There's an issue for that one, but nobody has stepped up yet. I'm in the middle of finishing iOS, Android, and Netlify. But if nobody does, then I'll probably do that one next. It would be nice for somebody else at the company to know how to do this, though. Otherwise, this is going to be me for the next year.
As part of my understanding of how it works, I would like to contribute one. Unfortunately, I don't think .NET will be it for me, but yeah, I'm more than happy to try and contribute there as well.
It's like 30% of the world is programming in that language, and we don't have a template for it. And it makes it feel like if you're on .NET, you have to use Azure DevOps instead of GitLab, which is like us missing out big time.
The way that I'm doing the Android and iOS ones is just going to the Android and iOS developer getting started documentation and taking the Hello World apps and getting those working. So it's actually, even if you don't know .NET, you might be able to make the .NET one if you're an engineer.
We can have a more explicit request instead of, hey, people donate stuff. Like, who wants to pair with me in a video call for an hour while we make a template together for .NET?
Oh, that's a cool idea.
That's a cool idea.
Another option might be, I mean, that worked well. We don't have to wait for the next hackathon, but on the last one that we organized, we had a set of priority issues where we pointed people to participate on. By people, I mean members from the wider GitLab community. So perhaps we can make this somewhat more visible as well.
The managed team is also responsible for cycle analytics. Cycle analytics is the main benefit for selling with GitLab. But the metrics have been kind of almost unusable for us, and I haven't heard any customer using them. And I've seen a lot of ideas on how to improve them, but they all seem to assume a big refactor was needed. Is there a way to just make a bit of progress, a tiny bit of progress that does not need a lot of engineering time? Is there an iteration we can do instead of just ignoring it like we've done for I think almost half a year, maybe up to a year, where it's just broken?
So the answer is yes. There are several small iterations that we're planning on. We originally had the first iteration planned for 11.8, which became for 11.9, but that was pushed out due to the focus on SSO. The first thing that we want to fix is we just simply want to fix what's already there. There are a number of calculations that are being calculated incorrectly and will result in the user seeing not enough data, which makes the feature kind of like unusable and very unhelpful for our customer. I think the second thing that we want to do is just simply make cycle analytics available also at the group level, because it's far too constrained if you can only see it at the project level. So we are planning on getting to those calculation fixes, ideally in not 11.10, since we have security issues that are going to push that out to 11.11 most likely, and then to allow for more flexible scoping of cycle analytics in 12.0. So you're right. Like, I don't think that it's going to need a massive refactor for us to make this more usable, but I think the first step is we need to fix what's already there, which is a relatively small step forward that we'll do as soon as we can.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm glad that you're prioritizing that, and I totally agree that SSO and security fixes come first.
On slide number 8, you mentioned that you're going to be working on improving the way we externalize strings and making that easier for everybody to contribute to. I'm wondering if there's also plans for the other side of the story, where community contributors put strings in crowd in, but it's still quite a manual and time-consuming process to get those in and get those in a release, get those validated, and so on. Is there any progress on that being made?
So you're right, Bob. There's two problems that we want to fix. We want to make it easy for contributors to externalize strings and also be able to track the progress of that progress. But you're right that there are also improvements that we need to make on our own processes to make this easier to integrate on our side. The current plan is to focus on the first problem for now, which is we simply at the moment don't have a good sense of the number of strings that are left to externalize in GitLab. So we want to solve that by ideally flagging those strings that we need with possibly with linters, so that we can at least build a robust set of issues that categorize all the areas and views that we need to externalize. I think what that will enable us to do is ideally organize a community hackathon to be able to both work on both the externalization of these strings and also some of those technical debt issues that we need to fix that you just pointed to. And then ideally we'll get we'll get assistance from the community like we do for all of our other features here at GitLab. And then we'll schedule the rest kind of appropriately. But as China kind of becomes a little bit more of a focus for us, we would definitely want to make externalizing all strings within GitLab and making that a very easy system for us to be able to follow with future features so we don't fall behind in the future again, and make that a very easy system to maintain. So you're right, it's two parts. I think we're going to focus on the first problem first. And hopefully, as part of the community hackathon, we can include some of those tech debt issues that we can ideally work on in partnership with the community.
On that, Bob, I've linked through to an issue in the group conversation doc, which is about automating that process, which was opened the best part of a year ago. If you've got any kind of feedback to whether that's still relevant or whether there's any other ways we could be doing that, then any contributions would be good.
Where did you link that?
I've linked through on the group conversation doc, which I will in turn just add as a link into the Zoom chat. Sorry, Sid.
No problem. No, that was relevant. And I'm set me straight here. That there was a person, I think 3 years ago, who translated all of GitLab just by himself. Probably it's 4 years ago now. So I still have this idea that it's just not a lot of work to just externalize all the strings, but I'm probably wrong. But can someone kind of talk about like what we're running into? Like it's not just a big grep operation on the code base and things like that. And maybe we should find that person and try to engage them, maybe pay the person. Is it really like that much work, or is it like, oh, someone makes themselves angry for 3 days and then everything is externalized?
The problem, I can comment on that a little bit as I've worked on that in the past. The problem is that we're now making a lot of assumptions based on English. So we've split up sentences and then combined them in Ruby, and then it's easy to translate every piece of that sentence separately, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a proper translation in all the languages we want to support. So a lot of those like sit down and translate, like externalize the strings, can be done, but still we need to make sure that we do it properly for those edge cases as well.
And is that something we want to do right away, or do we want to just keep track of those things and get to them later? Like, how do we think about that?
I think right now the idea is a little bit like what we've done in the past is like, we don't have a good solution for that now, so we'll just move it forward like this. And we might end up with a weird string. Somebody's going to create an issue for it, and then we're going to think about improving that. But there's also like sometimes security implications that we need to think about because we mix HTML in those strings. So then we need to take care of that somehow. So there's still a human that needs to look at what's going on for now, and that's the annoying part.
Also, just comparing from 3 or 4 years ago, however long it was, I think there are a lot of other places now we're exposing these strings. We've got the various layers on the front end also with translatable strings. So that's why we're trying to introduce these linters from both the Ruby side, so we cover the API and the backend errors, but then also introduce it on the front end side so that it's just more automated and not just like, please make sure you externalize strings in your merge request. So, but then that's also part of the challenge with accounting for understanding the coverage of externalization, because there are these other places that we have to grep towards, and the implementation is not always the same.
That makes sense. Thanks for explaining why it's harder.
I can add a little bit of color to that too. I worked for 2 years in the enterprise localization industry, and once we solve all these technical problems for enterprise customers, especially, there's the linguistic quality problem, which is arguably much harder to solve than the externalized string get translation sort of thing. And so we may have to find a way to involve a localization service provider, or find ways to not have it be the product of one person, but find a way to get linguistic reviews happening to make it a localized product that, for instance, large Japanese corporations would be willing to consume. Some cultures are extremely sensitive to industry terms, linguistic terms, and things like that. And I don't think we've even sort of bumped into those issues yet.
We have like sort of a process where trusted community members can approve translations, but yeah, I think if we want to step up our game there, then we'll need to come up with a different plan.
Eric, that's a good call out on actually using a localization company or an expert for languages that we think are particularly valuable or important. So if we decide to to make China or Japan or South Korea focused, that's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, you typically want professional translators who speak your source language, in this case English, as their second language, and your target language, Japanese, Korean, as their first language. And they should be in country because there's lots of cultural aspects that you don't get from an academic understanding of language. And you obviously want, low bus factors. So you want multiple translators that get your application, take time to learn the industry terms, and same with the reviewers. So you don't want someone, like code, you don't want someone reviewing their own translations, obviously. And I would say it's, I don't think it would cost us a ton. I mean, one of the reasons I left the localization industry is because it's sort of commoditized. People think in terms of pennies per word, and that's not a good pricing model for software companies. So most of the money will go into the types of stuff that we're going to do ourselves, the software work, the externalization of strings. That's where you end up paying these vendors a lot of money, and then the translators end up, it doesn't cost all that much to get the translations. So I think there would be good return on investment to do that. And then you can do things like turn things around really quickly, like within the span of a release, ship a feature in all the languages that you're officially supporting.
Yeah, that's a great call out. What we did at a mobile gaming company when I was running product there was we would just analyze based off of the statistics that we got from the user devices and understand where our paid customers were, where we had the greatest kind of conversion rate and the most free users, and then just prioritize like the top 10 languages and then find a localization company that could help us with that. So there might be a similar analysis that we could do kind of based off of the usage statistics that we get based off of various countries and various languages that we have now to say, maybe we prioritize Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and then, a few others in areas that we think might be worthwhile. So.
Yeah, and we could definitely do it with one vendor because there's like 6 big enterprise software languages that are very common. And then we can continue to allow crowdsourcing. I think for, if there's someone in the Ukraine that wants to translate the whole app, there should be nothing to prevent them from doing that as well. It's just a matter of when a region needs to step up to enterprise grade, we probably need to treat it as such. And welcome all contributions, but have this sort of extra flow.
Yeah, just want to make sure, like right now, like number one, get all the strings externalized, like not the linters, not the technical constructs, not getting it perfect, but like let's iterate and not have perfect be the enemy of good. Like right now we're half translating the application. That's obviously like the worst situation to be in. So we need to get out of that situation ASAP. That is the first thing to do. And there's a lot of other things to do. But I'd rather have translated thing that's like kind of broken because of the technical construct we have than some parts in Chinese and some parts in English. Like that is super bad.
You're right. That's considered unprofessional by the people consuming it. So that's definitely the first problem. And what I'll do is I'll talk with Christopher if that's not already in our definition of done. If you're writing a feature, externalize the strings. We can add that in, just so we're not creating new debt as we go.
Yeah, I think it should be in the definition of done. It should be in the linters. It should just automate that. And I think it's great that we're doing
that. Maybe we can organize some sort of those hackathons that we do for like writing blog posts, but for internalization of the software, and get like community contributions and make something that people want to just go ahead and send us 1,000 merge requests, internationalizing everything that we need.
Yeah, Gabriel, I think that's a great idea, and that's kind of what we're planning. I think the first step is we at least need to have a comprehensive set of issues that people can work on so they can actually know which parts of the application to externalize. So I don't necessarily care about having like perfect understanding over, we have, X number of strings to externalize and we've externalized Y of them. I'm fine with just like a list of views that people can just, that a contributor can just take off of a stack and then just immediately start externalizing. So I think that we need some way of being able to present that for the community before we can schedule a hackathon, which is why I think that the linters could help us, help us with that. But I personally just want a list of issues that a contributor can take and burn down, and we'll get there.
How will we get there? Are you going to make that all yourself, or can people help? Or?
So, Dennis, maybe you can talk about the strategy from that Luke kind of prioritized, but I think that we're prioritizing that work for 11.10.
Yeah, we just started creating a bunch of issues, just go through the app views.
Dennis, you're breaking up.
Directories and just start burning it down that way. But I don't think my internet connection is a bit poor right now. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So Luke's created a bunch of issues to start going through like the views, like the app and views folder. But I think we just need to go and comb through the rest of the code base to see where we might actually have strings otherwise, like for API responses and things like that. So there should be, we will have in the next week or so, like hopefully 85–90% of like the main areas that we think the strings are, and then we can break those out further, and then we can start assigning those, or at least having those available for people to pick up. But yeah, we're going to be good.
That sounds really great. What do people think about turning the linters on first? So any code you touch, you have to externalize.
I think that's a great first step, and that'll catch like 80 or 85% of stuff. And then there's always ways to avoid linters, which is why I suggest the definition of done. There's always ways to write strings in JavaScript that the linters can't catch, but that'll open the floodgates of issues.
Cool.
I see that Philippe asked in chat on your new estimation process, can you share a bit more about your experience and especially how it affects the way you follow progression? Liam and Dennis, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah, I can start. Just can you clarify on what you mean by how it affects the way you follow progression, just so I understand that completely?
Yeah, sure. Actually, we're in the middle of updating the process on our side as well. So we are wondering what would be the best option, and that seems to be a quite nice process that you have there. So we will probably experiment with that. The problem that we have now is mostly to follow progression. So to see where we are between we start to work on an issue and the issue is done. We have nothing in the middle because we don't have any progression in the issue. I don't want to read all the commands on a daily basis, just to know that. And I have the feeling that splitting issues in smaller issues, that would help to have at least a kind of progression, because you can see that on 5 issues, for example, you have done 3, and that means you probably have done more than half of the global issue. I'm just curious about your feedback on this experiment, and if you see any gaps, any wars, any traps that we should avoid in the security team.
Yeah, so I mean, we really just kicked this off for 11.9, and I mean, as far as our initial results, I think it's been really positive. What I mean by that is, and one thing I want to reiterate is like, we are weighting these things, but these are not the end result that we're going after. What we're looking for by doing this estimation is to just kind of encourage more conversation, because a lot of the times we have these main issues and there's UX, backend, and front end, and then we're not really sure, okay, we've got some labels to indicate UX is ready, but then backend might be happening, but then you have all of these comments and discussions happening in one issue. So breaking it out and then kind of understanding that there's these dependencies, and then knowing that we have to estimate it, kind of already started having these conversations, and that already actually contributed to the following the progression. One example I can give is that, like right now, we're working on being able to improve the SSO flow, and so there's a front end ticket for that, or sorry, front end issue for that, UX issue, and back end. And for front end, we know that we need UX specs to be at least in a almost final state, as well as some back end progress to be made, just so we can have an idea of how the integration will look like. So then we have it, maybe not the fullest level of confidence, but at least we have some confidence to be able to say, this is how big I think it is. And if it's hitting 8 or so, then we can break it down. But what's happening is that we have front end engineers going in and checking in on that UX issue and seeing, okay, where are we at? And as we get closer to the first, we may have to ask, like, hey, UX designer, what's your feeling on this? Maybe we can also follow up on the progression of that issue itself, and we can see, okay, if UX isn't ready yet, then should we think about moving front end out to the next release or things like that? But then, in addition to that, we've started asking more questions because we know that because we see this progression, we might have questions ourselves. Because one thing we on front end weren't doing is like digging deep enough into the code to understand like how much do we have to do, how much work is actually involved. And so by seeing that progression, we were like able to ask more questions and things like that. So I don't know, to kind of summarize it all up, it definitely spurred more conversation. And I think by having the main issue with the like UX back end and front end broken out, it's easier just to pop in and see like what each part is doing. And then also by the nature of splitting it out, it's more organized. So Liam, I don't know if you want to add to that, but just to kind of wrap my bit up, it was like, we'll see how it shakes, how it results in the end of this release. But ultimately too, we wanted to try to groom our backlog a little bit more and kick these milestones off with better understanding before we actually start the work. So I think it's looking promising so far.
Yeah, I think if we're to use it as a more of kind of a velocity metric, that's something we can determine in a couple of milestones down the line once we've gathered a bit more data. But I think, yes, on Dennis's point, that wasn't necessarily the main intention. But if it's a side effect, then that could be positive to help with planning in the future.
Just to wrap up on this, it's going to solve one of the problems that we spotted, and I'm talking to my team right now if they're watching this. The last thing I want is a customer following an issue and disabling the notifications because we are talking too much about estimation. This is really noisy for the customers, and they will be really pissed off if we are adding a lot of comments before the iteration because they're just following that. So having a different issue for each domain is going to solve that problem directly. So kudos on that. We're probably going to experiment with that as well.
Awesome. And the final point for me is just we're trying to make the estimation as light touch as possible so that we're not investing sort of a huge amount of time into that. I'm aware of the time, and we're just a couple of minutes away from the company call. So just apologies that we didn't manage to get the slide deck up on the event earlier, but it looks like we've had a really good conversation off the back of that anyway. So unless there's any closing remarks from anyone, we'll end the call and move to the company call. Perfect.